90% of narcissist victims repeat the same devastating pattern. They escape an abusive relationship, breathe a sigh of relief, swear they'll never go through it again, and then, as if drawn by an invisible magnet, they find exactly the same type of person, the same control, the same manipulation, the same poison disguised as love. You might even think you know the signs. You can list the red flags, identify the tactics, recognize the manipulative patterns. But something deeper is at play, something that transcends conscious logic and is rooted in the most primitive layers of your psyche. Carl Jung dedicated his life to exploring the hidden territories of the human mind. He discovered that our psyche operates through archetypal patterns, unconscious complexes that govern our choices without our awareness. And when it comes to abusive relationships, there's a specific complex Carl Jung would call traumatic repetition compulsion, a psychological mechanism that unconsciously forces the victim to recreate the very dynamics that wounded them. This isn't weakness. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's psychological programming. It's the unconscious mind trying to resolve an old trauma by replaying the same scenario, in the illusory hope that this time the outcome will be different. It's as if the wounded psyche says, if I can just make this person love me, then I'll finally fix the original wound. But here's the truth no one tells you. As long as you don't understand the deep mechanisms of this repetition, as long as you don't unmask the complexes operating in the shadows of your mind, you will continue to be drawn to the same emotional vampires. They recognize in you the ideal victim, not because you are weak, but because you carry the invisible marks of unresolved trauma. The narcissist's victim develops a specific energetic signature, an emotional frequency that silently screams, I need to prove my worth. I accept crumbs of affection. I confuse intensity with passion. I turn chaos into familiarity. And emotional predators pick up on this frequency from afar. Carl Jung always said that what we don't make conscious governs us as fate. The pattern you're about to discover isn't just a behavioral tendency. It's an autonomous complex that hijacks your romantic, professional, and social choices. It's an invisible program running in the background, always steering you toward the same emotional traps. What's most haunting is that this pattern usually begins in childhood. The first narcissist in your life probably wasn't a romantic partner. It was someone much closer, someone who should have protected you but instead planted the seeds of the programming. And ever since, you've been repeating this dance without realizing it. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have a natural radar for healthy relationships while others always end up with the same problematic types? This isn't a coincidence. It's pure unconscious psychology at play. But today, something is going to change. Because when Carl Jung discovered the deep mechanisms of repetition compulsion, he also revealed the path to liberation. And you're about to understand not only why you repeat the pattern, but how to break that cycle forever. Pause for a moment and be brutally honest with me. How many relationships have you had that started like a fairy tale and ended like a nightmare? How many times have you caught yourself saying, I don't deserve this, but stayed anyway? How many times have you felt that strange mix of excitement and anxiety at the start of a romance, confusing internal chaos with chemistry? Look into the mirror of your romantic history. You'll see a pattern repeating like a broken record. The intense man who made you feel special, but then made you feel small. The charismatic woman who promised you the world, but turned every encounter into an emotional battlefield. The boss who valued you publicly, but humiliated you privately. As you read this, a part of you is recognizing itself. A part is whispering, it's true, I always choose the wrong people. But another part is resisting, trying to justify, trying to explain why each situation was different, why each person was a unique case. That resistance is the voice of the complex. It's the programming speaking. It's the part of your psyche that needs to keep the pattern alive, because challenging it would be admitting a painful truth. You have been an involuntary accomplice to your own destruction. How many times have you ignored the signs because the person was different? How many times have you accepted behaviors you would never tolerate in other areas of your life? How many times have you convinced yourself that true love requires sacrifice, when in reality you were just repeating the script of trauma? Your true essence knows when something is wrong. It whispers through anxiety, knots in your stomach, the feeling of always walking on eggshells. But the traumatic programming speaks louder. It convinces you that intense relationships are passionate relationships, that needing to win someone over is natural, that love without drama is love without spice. While you accept the persona of the understanding victim, the human who gets others' problems, who sees the potential behind cruelty, your true nature fragments. You become an expert at justifying the unjustifiable, finding explanations for the inexplicable, and giving infinite chances to those who don't deserve even one. Do you recognize this pattern? It's because you were molded by it. You were trained, from a very early age, to associate love with struggle, affection with achievement, and care with desperate effort. You learned that true love is something you earn, not something you receive naturally. While you wear the mask of the strong woman who can endure anything, the special person who can see beyond appearances, the generous soul who never gives up on anyone, your true self screams for liberation. It wants relationships based on mutual respect, shared growth, and genuine peace. But you were taught to confuse peace with boredom, respect with a lack of passion, stability with the death of romance. You were programmed to feel that something is missing when there's no crisis to solve, problem to fix, or person to save. Do you recognize this trap? It's because you've been living in it. And today, you're going to understand exactly how it works, where it comes from, and most importantly, how to destroy it once and for all. Because this pattern isn't your destiny. It's just programming. And all programming can be rewritten. Traumatic repetition compulsion is one of the cruelest mechanisms of the human psyche. Carl Jung discovered that our unconscious mind operates through autonomous complexes, psychological structures that function as independent programs, directing our behaviors without our awareness. When a child grows up in an environment where love is conditional, where affection needs to be earned through performance, where attention comes mixed with rejection, their brain creates a specific neural map. This map defines what is familiar, what is normal, what home means. And unfortunately, for many victims of narcissists, home means chaos. The first narcissist in your life wasn't a romantic partner. It was likely one of your parents, or an authority figure who should have protected you but instead planted the seeds of the pattern. That person taught you without words that love is something you earn, that you deserve, that you lose easily. They taught you that relationships are battlegrounds where you constantly need to prove your worth. And then something fascinating and terrible happens. Your psyche interprets this dysfunctional dynamic as true love. The emotional chaos, the roller coaster of affection and rejection, the constant feeling of being tested, all of this becomes your unconscious definition of passion. Your traumatized brain associates intensity with intimacy, drama with desire, struggle with love. That's why healthy relationships can seem boring to an unhealed victim. The kind, respectful, consistent person who treats you well from day one triggers a silent alarm in your unconscious. This is too easy. Something must be wrong. True love isn't like this. Carl Jung would call this identification with the complex. You don't just have a traumatic pattern, you've become that pattern. Your identity has been built around the role of the victim who needs to prove her worth, the savior who sees potential where others see destruction, the special woman who can love the impossible. The narcissist functions like a vampire of other people's shadows. He has no substance of his own, so he needs to drain the vitality of others to feel real. And he has a naturally finely tuned radar to detect victims with an active repetition pattern. He recognizes from afar that emotional frequency that says, I accept crumbs. I turn potential into reality. I fix broken people. Your original wound acts as a magnet for emotional predators. Not because you are weak, but because you carry a specific energetic signature, that of the wounded child still trying to fix the original relationship that hurt them. The pattern operates in cycles. First comes idealization. You find someone who triggers all the familiar chemistries of your traumatic childhood. Then comes devaluation. The person reveals their true abusive nature. Then comes discard. You are rejected, or you leave the relationship. And finally comes repetition. You find another person exactly the same. This isn't destiny. It's just psychology. And when Carl Jung mapped these dark territories of the human mind, he also discovered something revolutionary. Every complex can be dissolved through consciousness. Every pattern can be broken through individuation. All programming can be rewritten through shadow integration. The first aspect of the pattern that 90% of victims repeat is the magnetic attraction to the dysfunctional familiar. Your unconscious was programmed to recognize home through signs of danger. When you meet someone who makes you slightly anxious, who awakens that strange mix of excitement and insecurity, who makes you feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster, your wounded brain interprets this as chemistry. In reality, it's trauma recognizing trauma. The emotionally healthy person who treats you well from the first date, who is consistent, respectful, predictable, triggers an alarm in your nervous system. Too easy, too calm. Where's the intensity? You confuse peace with boredom, stability with a lack of passion. Your traumatic pattern convinces you that if there's no drama to solve, there's no love to conquer. The second aspect is the compulsion to fix and save. You feel irresistibly drawn to people with potential, with sad stories, with visible wounds. Your savior complex activates automatically. You see beyond the surface, envisioning what the person could become if they had the right love. This is your original wound trying to heal through repetition. If you can make this person change, you will symbolically have fixed the traumatic relationship of your childhood. You become an expert at seeing qualities that don't exist, at creating heroic narratives where you are the protagonist who transforms lives through unconditional love. But broken people don't want to be fixed. They want to break others to feel normal. Narcissists don't seek growth. They seek narcissistic supply. The third aspect is an abnormal tolerance for abusive behavior. You develop a superhuman ability to justify the unjustifiable, to find explanations for cruelty, to give infinite chances to those who don't deserve even one. Behaviors you would never tolerate from strangers. You accept from special people because they have reasons. They've been through difficulties. They just need understanding. Your traumatic programming has created a distorted scale of normalcy. What should be unacceptable becomes complicated. What should be a reason to run becomes a challenge. You normalize aggression as strong personality, control as caring, jealousy as intense love, manipulation as a special way of being. The fourth aspect is the compulsive need to prove your worth. In healthy relationships, your worth is naturally recognized. In narcissistic dynamics, you constantly need to demonstrate that you deserve affection, attention, respect. You become performative, always trying to be the perfect girlfriend, the ideal employee, the understanding friend. This need for performance comes from the original wound. You were conditioned to believe that love is something you earn, not something you receive naturally. So you develop an identity based on what you do for others, not on who you essentially are. You become addicted to the feeling of being needed, even when it means accepting emotional crumbs in exchange for total surrender. Your unconscious equates effort with love. If it's not hard, if it's not hurting, if it's not costing you your peace of mind, it can't be true love. You are trained to confuse sacrifice with devotion, suffering with depth, struggle with passion, and narcissists exploit precisely this distorted programming, offering relationships that demand constant performance in exchange for intermittent affection. The fifth devastating aspect is the confusion between intimacy and chaos. Your definition of deep connection has been corrupted by traumatic programming. You were conditioned to associate emotional proximity with turbulence, vulnerability with danger, surrender with suffering. Moments of peace in relationships generate inexplicable anxiety. Your nervous system interprets harmony as the calm before the storm. Healthy relationships where conflicts are resolved through respectful communication, where differences are negotiated without drama, where you can be authentic without fear of retaliation, seem artificial to your wounded psyche. You feel like you're acting, that it's not real enough. In reality, you were programmed to believe that authentic relationships are constant emotional battles. The sixth aspect is identification with the role of the special victim. You develop a grandiose identity based on your ability to endure more than anyone, to love the impossible, to see beyond appearances. This heroic martyr persona secretly feeds your wounded ego. You feel unique, special, superior to people who give up easily on difficult relationships. Your original wound created a superiority complex disguised as kindness. You pride yourself on your resistance to abuse, your capacity to forgive infinitely, your ability to find explanations for any cruelty. But this isn't spiritual evolution. It's unresolved trauma masquerading as virtue. You aren't more loving than other people. You just have shattered boundaries. The seventh aspect is the compulsion to recreate the original dynamic. Unconsciously, you seek partners who reproduce the same energy of your primordial wound. If your father was emotionally absent, you fall for distant men. If your mother was controlling, you attract dominating women. If you grew up in an unpredictable environment, stable relationships seem suspicious. Your unconscious operates with a perverse logic. If I can just make this person love me the way my father never did, then I'll finally be healed. But narcissists don't heal. They re-traumatize. Each attempt to fix the past through the present only deepens the original wound. The eighth and cruelest aspect is the addiction to cycles of rupture and reconciliation. You become addicted to the chemistry of the trauma bond, the pain of rejection followed by the relief of temporary acceptance. This emotional roller coaster triggers the same neurotransmitters as powerful drugs. You confuse this addictive chemistry with true passion. Relationships that offer consistent love without drama, without abandonment followed by a triumphant return, do not activate this distorted reward system. You interpret consistency as lack of chemistry, security as boredom, respect as lack of intensity. Your brain has been hijacked by the neurology of trauma. The final aspect is the projection of the responsibility for healing onto others. You unconsciously expect the current narcissist to finally give you what your parents didn't: unconditional validation, emotional security, effortless love. But you are trying to heal a childhood wound through an adult who is even more wounded than you. As you project your healing power outward, as you seek completeness through others, you remain fragmented internally. Individuation requires you to become your own source of validation, to reparent the wounded child you carry within, to stop seeking outside what can only be found within. This is the pattern. Now you can see it, and only what is seen can be transformed. Now that you see the pattern that was operating in the shadows of your psyche, it's time to methodically dismantle it. The first tool of liberation is what Carl Jung would call conscious confrontation with the projected shadow. Grab a journal and list all your significant relationships from recent years, not just romantic ones, but also professional, familial, and intense friendships. For each relationship, honestly identify: what aspect of my original wound did this person represent? The absent father, the controlling mother, the unpredictable caregiver, the figure who promised love but delivered pain? Don't be afraid of the brutal truth. Your healing depends on radical honesty with yourself. Now comes the hardest part. Take responsibility for your unconscious choice. This doesn't mean blaming or punishing yourself. It means recognizing that you weren't a passive victim of circumstances, but an active participant in a dynamic your unconscious orchestrated. You chose these people because they offered the opportunity to repeat and supposedly resolve the original trauma. The second tool is the active imagination technique for dissolving complexes. Close your eyes and visualize your child self at the age when the original wound was created. See this child clearly: their posture, their expression, their clothes. Now visualize the figure who wounded them: the narcissistic father, the absent mother, the abusive caregiver. Observe the dynamic between them without judgment. See how the child contorts themselves to get love, how they diminish themselves to avoid rejection, how they accept emotional crumbs as if they were banquets. This is the original programming. Now, as the adult you've become, step into that scene. Tell your child self, you no longer need to earn love. You no longer need to prove your worth. You no longer need to accept cruel treatment hoping it will turn into affection. I am here now and I will give you everything you've always needed. Embrace that child. Remove them from the toxic environment. Take them to a safe place within your psyche. The third tool is the conscious redefinition of your attraction criteria. Make a list of the qualities you traditionally consider attractive: intensity, mystery, the need to win someone over, unrealized potential, dramatic stories, visible wounds. Now honestly recognize, these are not attractive qualities, they are traumatic triggers. Create a new list based on what your healthy essence truly needs: consistency, respect, clear communication, emotional stability, capacity for intimacy without drama, shared growth, genuine peace. Initially, these qualities might seem boring to your old programming. That's normal. You are detoxing from toxic relationships like an addict detoxes from drugs. The fourth tool is the practice of sacred boundary setting. Establish non-negotiable boundaries based on your intrinsic worth, not on your performance. For example, I do not accept being treated with disrespect, regardless of the circumstances. I do not tolerate emotional manipulation, even if disguised as love. I do not take responsibility for the feelings of other adults. The final tool is integration through reparenting. Become the parent you always needed. Give yourself the unconditional validation you seek from others. Celebrate your achievements. Comfort yourself in difficulties. Defend yourself when necessary. Stop outsourcing your emotional worth. Every time you feel the familiar pull towards someone who triggers your old patterns, pause, breathe. Remember, this isn't love, it's trauma recognizing trauma. Your healing isn't in repeating the pattern, but in definitively breaking it. You deserve peace, not war. You deserve consistency, not chaos. You deserve real love, not a traumatic simulation of intimacy. You have changed by absorbing this revelation. There's no going back. You can no longer unsee the pattern that governed your choices. You can no longer deceive yourself by saying, "This time it's different," when you meet another person who triggers the exact same internal alarms. The veil of unconsciousness has been torn. The programming has been exposed. You are now the guardian of your own story. No longer the victim who compulsively repeats past traumas, but the warrior who consciously chooses her present. No longer the savior who gets lost, trying to fix others, but the alchemist who transforms her own wounds into wisdom. You have broken the ancestral curse that passed from generation to generation. The wounded child you carried within has finally found the home it always sought, within your own healed essence. The pattern stops here, with you, in this generation. Unmask yourself completely. Remove all the masks you wore to please narcissists. The mask of the understanding victim. The mask of the tireless savior. The mask of the woman who accepts anything in the name of love. These personas are not you. They are distortions created by trauma. Your true essence is sovereign. It does not negotiate with emotional predators. It does not diminish itself to make others feel big. It does not confuse drama with passion, struggle with love, sacrifice with devotion. Your essence knows its intrinsic worth and accepts nothing less than it deserves. Reclaim your sacred selectivity. You are not for just anyone. You are not a recovery project. You are not a source of narcissistic supply. You are a complete human being who deserves relationships based on reciprocity, mutual growth, and genuine respect. Dare to completely free yourself from the pattern. Every time you feel the familiar pull towards someone who awakens your traumatic triggers, celebrate. Your psyche is functioning perfectly by recognizing the danger. Use this information to choose differently. Use this wisdom to protect the healed child who now resides within you. You are the break in the chain of repetition. You are the generation that said no to the ancestral pattern. You are the living expression of individuation achieved through the courage to face the most painful truth, that you were an involuntary accomplice to your own destruction. But that's over. The pattern died. The programming was deleted. The complex was dissolved. You have been reborn as the sovereign version of yourself. Comment on which aspect of the pattern most alerted you. Which recognition was most painful? Which revelation most liberating? Your courage to see the truth inspires others to do the same, like if you felt the transformative power of breaking a pattern that seemed unbreakable, if you experienced the power of becoming conscious of what once operated unconsciously. Subscribe to continue this journey of individuation and protection, to deepen the work of shadow integration and building truly healthy relationships. The liberation is just beginning. The pattern has been broken, but the construction of the new version of you is a continuous process. You now have the tools. You now have the awareness. You now have the power. Unmask yourself. Free yourself. Become.